Initially, this haunted home series was strictly going to be for the month of October, spooky month, Halloween, but the rabbit hole I have dug myself into, and especially with y'all suggestions, we're going to keep this series going throughout the year. Today we are going to talk about the White Witch of Rose Hall, Annie Palmer. We're going back to Montego Bay, Jamaica. And thank you to Abraham for suggesting Annie Palmer. Let's get right into her story. So today we're talking about Annie Palmer, who was born Annie Patterson. She is the daughter of an English mother and an Irish father. When she was 10 years old, her and her family moved to Haiti. Now, while in Haiti, her nanny practiced voodoo, and she didn't shy away from teaching young Annie voodoo as well. So much so, later on in life, as she continued learning voodoo from her nanny, her parents did pass away from yellow fever, but the nanny continued to teach her the practice up until her adult age, and she officially became an expert in voodoo. So once Annie Patterson became an adult, she realized, you know what, it's about time for me to settle down with a rich man. So that's exactly what she did. She moved to Jamaica and she met John Palmer, who was the official owner of the Rose Hall estate, and then she officially became Annie Palmer. Annie and John Palmer are newlyweds, and usually you go through the honeymoon phase when you're in a relationship. You can't get enough of each other. You just all up under each other. But with Annie, within 3 months, she was tired of John. She was sick of him. He was annoying. She needed a break. So you may be thinking, did she go and find her another rich man? Did she go and marry someone else, since we see that she's a fan of marriage? No, she decided to take on her slaves as lovers. So just as she grew tired of her husband, she grew tired of the slave she was having sex with as well. I'm going to say sex, even though I'm sure I can use another word, because I'm sure these encounters were forced. So once John Palmer found his wife, Annie Palmer, having sex with the slaves, he nearly beat her to death. But mysteriously, he was the one that would be found dead the next day. It is believed that Annie killed her husband by poisoning his coffee. And this similar method was used to kill off slaves as well, once she was done using them. So now that John Palmer is dead, the Rose Hall estate officially belongs to Annie Palmer. So she would continue to forcefully take slaves in as lovers and kill them after she grew tired of them. And she tortured others in a variety of ways. If she caught one of the slaves lying, she would cut their tongue. She would spit on them if she didn't like the way they looked at her. She would behead them if they did anything else to displease her, or just flat out kill them whenever she felt like it. When slaves would have babies, she would tie up the babies, place the babies in ant piles until the ants ate the babies to death, and utilize the skeleton of the babies for her voodoo rituals. She set bear traps all around the property so that slaves could not escape. For the slaves who worked in the kitchen, they were required to whistle the entire time they were in the kitchen cooking, fixing the food, because no one can whistle with a mouthful of food. So to avoid them from eating or stealing food, she will make them whistle. So if she were to stop hearing the whistle, she would assume that one of them are eating, and she would take the discipline into her own hands. Due to her dangerous and just malicious ways, the slaves referred to her as the White Witch of Rose Hall, which is how she got the name today. Once a slave did try to get some type of get back. They tried to poison her milk. Annie, of course, found out about it. A lot of people think she found out about it through her spirit guides, her spirit. She got a message from whoever she considered her higher power to be that she was about to be poisoned. She found out the slave who poisoned her milk. She beheaded the slave.
The slaves were thrown into a cell 16 feet below the ground to suffocate to death.
She placed them there without food, water, light, and medical attention, so that most of them would die from heat and hunger. It is said because of how she was so cruel, a servant girl tried once to poison her in a cup of milk.
The White Witch discovered the plot, and the servant was beheaded.
She ordered a high voodoo priest to walk all the way from Montego Bay, barefooted with that bloody head in a basket on his or her head.
Also, just a quick disclaimer for these type of stories where I'm talking about people who use voodoo, witchcraft, hoodoo, root work, whatever, in malicious ways. This is never to prove that voodoo or any type of magical working is bad in general. Of course, y'all should know that by my channel. These are just cautionary tales and historic tales of the way that they were used maliciously and how it turned out. None of these stories end up for a happy ending for the person who maliciously used their powers of voodoo. So if you're a person who's already suspicious of voodoo or you think voodoo in general is evil, these videos are not to prove your point. These videos are just to show within the magical world, within spirituality, people have a choice whether to use their knowledge and their access to the spiritual realm for good or for evil. I do believe that there's good and evil. You can't have one without the other. Some people use voodoo, witchcraft, or whatever for protection, prosperity, for health and healing, and others use it for malicious intent to take advantage of people. So these are the instances in where you have to be careful of people who call themselves a voodoo priest, because some people use their access to the spiritual realm selfishly. Just the same within any religion or spirituality, you have some pastors who are absolutely amazing, very helpful, giving, help out in the community. Then you have other pastors who use their platform to off their congregation, like we heard about the other story that happened in Montego Bay. So no matter the religion, you could use your access and your knowledge for good or for evil. These are just cautionary tales. Annie did get married 2 more times, and of course she did kill her husbands 2 more times. One husband she killed by stabbing him in the chest, and to ensure he was dead, she poured boiling oil into his ear. And for her 3rd husband, she killed him by strangulation, but with the help of her slave lover, Taco. So we're going to get more into this love affair with Taco. I hate calling it a love affair because I'm sure these men were forced and they were just doing whatever she said out of survival. But Taco, T-A-K-O-O, Taco, I believe it's Taco. That's how they pronounced it in the video. But we're going to get more into this because Annie did fall in love with another man by the name of Robert Rutherford, but he was not in love with Annie. He was in love with Taco's granddaughter. So we can imagine the rage and jealousy that was boiling into Annie, and this led her into doing a voodoo spell on Taco's granddaughter, killing her 9 days later. Now we can assume that it was probably poison because, again, for my own beliefs, I don't believe you can use voodoo to kill someone because that's playing God, and there are certain just regulations within spell work and any type of rituals, free will, and you can't play God. So I don't believe you could kill someone with voodoo. You may use your spell work or whatever, but you may take matters into your own hand by actually poisoning them or doing some type of physical harm to them like she did previously. But that's besides the point. So the granddaughter ended up dying 9 days later. The granddaughter's grandfather, Taco, was pissed off because I'm sure he was just doing what he had to do out of survival. But now that one of his actual family members were harmed in the process, Taco wanted vengeance. I can imagine the anger that Taco had. So he literally took matters into his own hands and strangled Annie to death. So now the slaves knew that Annie Palmer practiced voodoo. They knew she was a witch. They knew she was an evil witch. And there's a saying that we have, if you evil on earth, you'll even be more evil in the spiritual realm. So they knew they just couldn't bury her in the ground. They had to do something else to keep her spirit under control as well. The slaves took her body and buried it in a deep hole on the estate. They then burned all of her possessions for the fear they might be tainted by her spirit. Then a voodoo ritual was carried out to ensure that her spirit could not escape its deep grave. However, it is told that the ritual was not performed correctly and her spirit was released into Rose Hall. Now, when they say this ritual was not performed correctly, I'm going to say something in no way, shape, or form am I trying to help you guys cover up a murder, but I'm assuming they didn't utilize a certain spirit that is needed to lock in her spirit. So I'm assuming they probably didn't do a certain sigil. They probably didn't do a sacrifice over. They probably didn't do a blood sacrifice over. They should have took some of her blood and utilized it against her own will. So technically it's like her energy that is sealing in her own. It's a whole thing. So I'm assuming it was probably just the sealing part where her spirit wasn't locked in. It seems they probably just burned all of her possessions. They probably took the ashes and put it into the grave. They probably thought that was doing enough because her energy is locked in. Did you guys burn the mattress where she laid at rest, where her physical and spiritual body is most vulnerable? You got to burn that mattress to make sure that energy's out. Did you break all of the mirrors or anything with the reflection that she looked in? Because if you guys watch my mirror magic video, you know reflections, mirrors, they lock in the soul. So that's why anytime you get, all mirrors are used because always someone looks into them. But you want to make sure you cleanse your mirrors, especially if you're getting it from an estate sale or a thrift store where it was in someone's house for a long long time, and all of that energy reflections. Watch my mirror magic video. You want to make sure you cleanse mirrors. I'm like, did you break all the mirrors? Did you get rid of any utensils she may have used? You know, in my head, I'm like, you got to get rid of everything. You just can't burn her dresses and jewels. You got to just, she ate with this fork, get rid of it. She brushed her hair with this brush, get rid of it. You know, you really have to get into the nitty gritty. And then once that energy is removed, you have to cleanse the house and you have to replace the energy. So maybe someone else, you know. But I'm sure they wasn't thinking about all that. Or maybe I'm overthinking it now because I'm like, oh, I would have did this. Girl, you wouldn't have did nothing but cried. So with that type of energy, it's a bunch of stuff that goes behind it. That's why they say it wasn't done correctly, because her energy still floats around Rose Hall. There are many accounts. They see a shadow running through the house. They hear harsh footsteps. They hear, I don't know what you will call this sound, but the gushy, harsh sound of a head being slaughtered. Many people get chills when they walk in. They feel like someone's following behind them.
When I walk by her graveside at night, you'll hear those little crickets, cricks, cricks, clicks, clicks. You are in the spirit world.
At night, 5 to 6, I closed all the windows and went home, because after 6 o'clock, when the ghosts start to come in, as soon as I get closing the door, I feel different. You know, I feel like somebody around me. So I close quickly and get out.
So now, in my research of this story, there is a separate tale that goes on with Annie Palmer as well. But I'm not going to share that. Okay, we're going to stop right here because you want to know why. There is another tale that is shared where it was saying, oh, all of that voodoo stuff isn't true. She didn't do voodoo. She wasn't married that many times. She didn't kill her husbands. Her husbands died from yellow fever. And I don't feel like that's true because, first of all, this happened in Montego Bay in Jamaica. And if the Jamaicans say that the voodoo story is true, I'm going to believe the Jamaicans, because why do Jamaicans will lie? I'm sure they know more than we do. Also, I feel like that's another attempt to erase the magical history that's within the Black community, because, of course, they're going like, oh, her nanny didn't do voodoo because you guys didn't want Black people doing voodoo anyway. During this time period, the Haitian Revolution was still in place. It was taking place there. I give y'all the time period. Sorry. This took place in the 18th century, and, of course, during this time, we know the Haitian Revolution was still on a high, where the Haitians used their spiritual power that aided into their victory. So I feel like this is a lot of historians' attempt to take away the voodoo aspect of it, not to make it sound more palatable, but just like, oh, Black people weren't doing voodoo. Voodoo didn't work for real. They just was making up stuff. So I feel like they tried to unwind that entire story just to take away the voodoo, the spiritual, and the magical aspects within Black history, because they're saying, oh, that's not true. But in my head, I'm like, it's because the Haitians just got y'all at. You wanted to take away our spiritual beliefs when we first was forced over here. So of course you're going to try to take away that aspect in all the stories as well. I'm going out on a tangent because it really pisses me off. So when I do these stories, it's always another article or book like, oh, they said they do root work, but that's not what really happened. It's this and this. It's like, first of all, who are you to say it? So that's why with this story, I'm like, if the Jamaicans, when people go toward this property, if they're still telling that story, they're closer to the actual scene of the situation. So I'm gonna believe the Jamaicans. So you can tour Rose Hall. I was reading so many comments from people that they were literally begging their tour guide not to stop at Rose Hall, because, you know, when you're taking a tour, the tour guide will start telling you the story while you're passing by the property. Once they would hear the story, and I'm sure the Jamaican tour guide has much more details than I do, they would get so scared. They're like, okay, can we just drive by? We ain't got to stop. Let's just go to the next destination, because the eerie feeling they would get with just passing by, no one wanted to step foot on the property. And also the people who were brave enough, they always say, I will never go back. Oh, I got so scared. It was such a weird feeling. I got nauseous. You could start hearing things. They wanted to rush the tour, but I'm going to go. So on my trip to Jamaica, I will be making my way to Rose Hall. I just want to see. Like, when I tell these stories and I do the research behind it, I always get curious to be able to see it in person. And I'm sure once I'm there in person, I could get a lot more information where I could add to this besides just books and articles and videos. I want to go there. I want to ask 1,000 questions. I want to ask, what's this? Who's this? What was this used for? You know me. So hopefully I will have a part 2 of this video once I go to Jamaica, because that is a trip I have coming up. So New Orleans and Jamaica, I will circle back with those videos. So you guys let me know down below, will you tour Rose Hall? Have you ever been there? What version of the story did you hear? If I left out any details, let me know down below. I like when y'all can add on personal experiences or things I may have missed. Let me know down below. But thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. And like I always say, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. Until next time, you guys, I'll share.